Thanks for joining Just Us Chatting. I'm Tamara.
And I'm Michael. And this morning, one of the biggest pieces of news in the world right now is what's going on in Venezuela. A huge outpouring of protests against Nicolas Maduro. Many are calling him a dictator. There have been a lot of questions about the legitimacy of his election. And people are starving in the streets and eating dogs, and so it's not a happy situation in Venezuela. Yesterday, a man named Juan, I want to say Guaido.
Wow.
It's U-A-I.
Yeah, that is weird. I
Guaido.
have no idea.
So I'm going to say Juan Guaido declared himself with the support of hundreds of thousands of people that took to the streets. Just the pictures are amazing. They look like the Women's March or the March for Life that just happened over the past weekend. These are massive outpourings, and for a nation that's much smaller than the United States, this kind of mobilization, the numbers of people here are just insane. I'm kind of put some of this up so you can see what's going on. There's some, Juan Guaido declared himself to be the interim president, I think.
Has there been a coup or something?
It's basically it's a mostly nonviolent coup. The military in Venezuela is controlled by the current president, obviously, and 7 people died yesterday in clashes with the military. So the opposition leader stood in the streets of the capital and declared himself the legitimate president, cheered on by thousands of supporters and a growing number of governments, including the Trump administration. So Trump said, you know what, we agree. We don't think Maduro is a legitimate representative of the people. We don't see his power as legitimate. We think that, he didn't, obviously, I'm paraphrasing it. He came out in support of of Juan Guaido to
put him into power.
To say that the U.S. sees him as the legitimate president of, and it sounds like the man is looking to be an interim president. So
not necessarily permanent.
Not necessarily permanent. Maduro then said that he was cutting diplomatic ties with the United States. Gave us 72 hours to get out of the country. Telling American diplomats to be gone.
And accusing the Trump administration plotting to overthrow him.
Well, it's not just the Trump administration, guy. It's hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of your cities.
Yeah, you're starving.
This is all happening right now in Venezuela, and a lot of the other South American countries have come out in support of this transition of power. So we'll have to just kind of keep an eye on this and see how it goes. There's a lot of good news on this right now. I appreciated Ben Shapiro's take on it. I linked to that in the show notes, the description below. So that's there. He just talked about it a little bit this morning, and about the history of. One of the things that was most striking about that to me was the kind of the long history of leftist politicians in America. Supporting regimes that are, radical leftist regimes, and then just not having to face the consequences 2 or 3 decades later when everything collapses.
Yeah.
And not having to apologize for it or even be asked about it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, in the case of Venezuela, you've got all sorts of leftists in America who are, this stuff that's going on in Venezuela is great under Hugo Chavez, when they started nationalizing the oil industry and started nationalizing everything.
Back when was that? In the 90s?
In the 90s.
Yeah.
So and then because the media leans left and it's kind of uncomfortable, they just don't ask him these questions like, hey, what gives? You know, what do you think about it now?
When everything turns sour, they just like ignore it and stop talking about it.
Right, and it's like, Shapiro makes a good point that a lot of the momentum of leftist ideology in the Western world hinges on that fact. That they never have to, you know, it's always rah, 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 cheerleading for this great revolutionary thing that's happening somewhere, right? And then they never have to answer for that cheerleading when everything goes to hell and people are eating dogs and cats and, you know, the government solves the problem of infant mortality by, you know, saying that, by making it illegal to say that, to call the cause of death, or to label the cause of death as starvation.
Yeah.
That's how they solve the starvation numbers. They're not doing anything economically to feed people.
Yeah.
They're saying if somebody comes into the hospital, you have to say, oh, it was something, cardiac arrest or something. You can't call it malnutrition or starvation.
Yeah.
And so that's how they're fixing their numbers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to get off on this tangent too much, but it's kind of like the way that Obama got away with killing ridiculous numbers of, you know, civilians
in Yemen,
and all throughout the Middle East in 7 countries that he was dropping drone strikes on, because his administration, you know, restructured the definition, redefined enemy combatant to mean any male over the age of 16 that gets killed by our missiles.
Right. I thought it was even over like 12 or 14 or something.
It's not very, you know, high, right? But it's basically just any male person over a certain age that is in the strike zone. Like they said, literally, if you're standing, like if you're in the way of our missiles and you're a male of a certain age, that makes you an enemy combatant. Yeah. That's like, oh my God. And they got away with changing that. And the left, you know, because he was Obama, the left was just kind of like, that's fine. Yeah. I actually liked Obama, you know, and I voted for him in 2008. I liked kind of his charisma. I thought he was, you know, very stately. I thought he represented us well in some ways, but I just, you know.
But he lied about so many things.
I know, like part of the reason I voted for him in the first place was, you know, he was talking a lot of things that I enjoyed about civil liberties and the repeal of the Patriot Act and making sure that, you know, that you know, the power of the executive branch was limited and not abused. It's like, okay, that's the kind of person I want in the executive branch. Yeah. Nope, none of that happened.
He furthered it.
He furthered it. He, you know, attacking whistleblowers and all this stuff.
I wonder if he had good intentions.
He did not get my vote in 2012.
Right.
You know, because it was just like, nope, sorry.
I wonder if he had good intentions to begin with, and then if once he got into power, there were people that kind of pushed him to.
Well, that's a topic of the whole idea of the deep state and everything.
Yeah, it's probably a topic for another time. There's a whole scary rabbit hole to go down there. That's why. Well, never mind. I'm not gonna go into. Yeah. Just like my
most powerful figurehead in the world is surrounded by a bunch of people with guns.
Yeah,
all the time, and so there's all sorts of conspiracy theories down that rabbit hole, and I don't know, I just don't know, but you kind of got to go on a general assumption that we can all communicate with, so I'd say, okay, he's the president and it's his decisions and he's making decisions that he thinks are politically feasible, and if that's the case, then he was saying the things that he was saying in his campaigning just to say what people wanted to hear.
I know. I worry. I worry that that's what they all do,
well,
and then
I'm sure that's what most people do. They, certainly Hillary Clinton with focus groups, and Trump was using Cambridge Analytica to make sure that he was finding the exact talking points that worked with certain people, and then running those numbers and saying those things.
But the thing is, he actually is kept along the lines of what he was saying to be, when he was running. So what I'm saying is, like, it's worse when someone literally says they're going to repeal something, and then they get into office, and not only do they not repeal it, but they actually further the control that it has. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. It's kind of a little off topic, but
so
yeah, I don't want to get too much into that, but I mean, when they change these definitions, you know, to allow people to be killed, and then back to how to get on that.
We were talking about Venezuela and how like they basically made it illegal for doctors to rule the cause of death for infants or children as starvation.
Right.
So they have to come up with a different cause of death when it was actually
like
starvation.
The child stopped breathing because he was really weak and
dehydrated. It's like that's not much better, but and like people are literally having to bury their dead in their backyards.
Yeah, it's really really awful what's going on in Venezuela economically right now. And if you're at all interested in it, I would say, you know, it's going to be all over the news today. But check out Ben Shapiro's little rant on it, because he's right. I mean, we need to hold people accountable. Like when they were supporting these regimes in the past, you know, then we need to say, okay, we need you to tell us specifically where this went wrong, because this is something you supported in the past, and you're kind of telling us that we should do similar things now in our country. How come we should believe you? If the things you were supporting in the past have done this, why should we believe you when you want to do similar things in our country? Why should we believe that your little, you know, revolutionary experiment's going to work here?
Yeah.
Why?
And like the more moderate people are like, oh well, I'm not a socialist. I'm a democratic socialist.
Yeah, I want to vote for people that steal everyone else's money and redistribute it.
Yeah, that sounds a whole lot better. I don't know what socialist regime has not become murderous at some point.
Right. That's exactly. It's like saying I'm not a murderer. I'm a democratic murderer. I wouldn't just murder somebody without voting on it first. If we all agree that it's okay to murder someone, then we can murder them because that's democratic murder. It's like, no, that's still murder. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if you're a democratic socialist. Yeah. If you want socialist policies, and you look around the world and you see that everywhere they've sprung up, right? They fail miserably.
Yeah. I love Peterson's take on it when he's like, you know, like you'd know the right way to do it. Like you're so smart that, you know, you'd be able to make it work without having it become murderous.
Right. You're the you know, the radical savior that's gonna, you know, the Messiah that's so virtuous and you know, understands the disparities and the power imbalances and everything in the system so well, and you're so virtuous that, you know, if you were the one who was in charge of the regime,
it would go well.
It would work out, right? But, you know,
I don't know.
It's like, well, no, you know, Bernie, you know, put a guy like Bernie Sanders in, you know, charge of, you know, the socialist regime and let him, you know, redistribute everything. Well, got news for you. Bernie's going to die in like 5 years. He's old, right? Maybe not 5, maybe 10, maybe 20. Regardless,
he's up there.
You know what I mean? Like these regime, these top down, these kinds of democratic, right? It's like you can say that people voted, you know, Hugo Chavez into power too, but
but that still ended up horrible.
Yeah, it's like he had to. When you nationalize all these industries, it's. Well, and this is kind of weird too, because maybe I shouldn't go down that route. When you nationalize a bunch of industries, you end up like people get terrified. They don't want to invest. You know what I mean? Like if you go to like they nationalize the oil industry. It's like okay, well,
meaning it's like run by the government. Basically.
The government took the.
So it's a monopoly.
Well, first of all, one, it's a monopoly. 2, it's a monopoly that has the, you know, authority to use violence. So that's a good reason to have a separation between, you know, government and the market
and industry,
right?
Yeah.
Because if you've got the market and the government mixed up, then the more you do that, the more you've got markets that are allowed to use violence to enforce their profits.
Yeah.
Right. This is, you know, basically my problem with, you know, red light, you know, tickets and cameras and stuff like this. It's like, it's just a camera that takes a picture of you, and then if you don't give them $100, right, somebody with the gun can come to your house, and you know, it's uncool, right? This is not the way we should be living in a free society. So, the more you intermingle markets and government, the more you've got markets that are enforced by people with guns, and that's not free.
And it's
that's
like a for-profit thing when it should not. It shouldn't
You got
be about
for-profit
that.
prisons, for example.
Yeah.
It's a totally it's horrific, right?
Yeah.
You've got a for-profit model, right? That's literally driving human beings into your profit center with like kidnapping people from their families, putting them in metal cages for your profit.
Yeah.
That should
There's
not be
a whole bunch of
for-profit
collusion
system, right?
that could be happening with the people
there's
who own the prisons.
so much room for corruption.
Right, exactly. Like they could
incredible.
They could be paying off prosecutors and various people to get people
it's
in
unbelievable.
trouble.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a whole other. It's sickening to me.
It is. It's very. I'm not a fan.
We get off topic a lot.
We get off topic.
But
So anyway, yeah. Enough about Venezuela. I just think that,
it's something to be aware of.
It's
especially
definitely
if
something
you
to be aware
have
of.
any.
These people need to be held accountable. Like if they are, if somebody is preaching, democratic socialism or 70% marginal tax rates, you need to ask them, like, why do you think that these kinds of policies, or like, kind of capping, I've seen people come out and support. I've seen an article, I can't remember, I think it was on Vox. No, I don't know, it was Vox Salon, something like this. Somebody, like, Ocasio-Cortez is right. We should not have billionaires. There's no reason for billionaires to exist. We should just, like, cap people's earnings and ability to own property at a certain level and redistribute the rest.
You know what? That kills creativity and that kills drive. Like, why? Why are people not allowed to make money if they want to?
Because they believe it's a zero-sum game, right? They believe that if you have a certain amount of money, then that's enough for you, period, end of story, and we are going to take the rest of it, right? You don't get any more than X amount, whatever X amount happens to be. The problem with these people is that they think society exists in some sort of static state. So we're going to write a law about how it's illegal for people to have more than this amount of money, right? And let's say it's $100 million, right? Something like this. Okay, you can't have more than $100 million, right? And everyone, like, there's almost everyone has less than $100 million, and they're like, yeah, that's awesome, right? Well, the problem is, you still have people then who have $100 million,
right? And eventually that's going to be
eventually
too much.
that looks like that's way too much, and
right.
it keeps cutting it down, and it's like, oh, there's tons, and eventually it's like you can't have more than $100,000, and everyone's fucking poor and living in the gutter, and they're like, yeah. No more than $100,000, and like, let's cut that out, and it just grinds down the engine of productivity in our society. It's stupid.
Yeah.
It's just mind-bogglingly stupid and like simplistic. Yeah, people shouldn't be so rich. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're envious. That's what that is.
Right.
You have a, like, they're, I wish I had more, and here's these people over here who have more.
Right.
Just that kind of like. It's so limited. Unidimensional and self-centered and it's
a
ridiculous.
Really limited mindset. It's like those.
Believe me, I'm not even wealthy. Not even middle class. We're not like. Yeah. It's not like I think that.
But we have no problem with people.
Like other people make money.
Yeah.
They've done cool things. They've made a lot of money. I'm not sitting here like begrudging them a lifestyle.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
or acting as if they somehow like took the money that we would have made, or that somehow they've exploited people and taken away their ability to make money. It's like no.
It's not. It's just not true. It's just not true, and it's an incredibly simplistic way.
And they usually hire thousands of people. You know what I mean? Most of these companies, Amazon, like it's the best example right now. I mean, first of all, you can get anything you want pretty much from Amazon. Right. It's not all high quality, but I mean, you can get anything you want at a reasonable price, quickly.
Shipped to your house.
They have tons of employees, and you could argue like, well, they don't pay their employees that much, and they're hard on them, and they've got these really intense quotas where people have to like be working their butts off day in, day out. It's like, well, you can choose to work somewhere else. That's your choice whether you want to work for Amazon or not.
But the reason that Amazon provides a great service is because they are very competitive in that way.
They're very efficient.
They keep their costs down, right? They keep people working, right? And not only does it, but there's there's the extended market there too, right? They've provided a platform in which other people can sell their goods online.
Right. As an artist, I could be selling my jewelry on there. I don't, because it's easier to just stick with one platform.
Yeah, but it's like they've created like infrastructure that serves everyone. And this is the other thing that drives me nuts, these ideas like, oh, well, what about the roads? Who's going to be... Like, capitalists built the railroad system back in the, in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Why? Because they wanted to transport goods so they could make more money. Like, the same thing is happening now with Amazon. Like, they're building infrastructure that we all get to use.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they can sell their products. Same thing with Google. They're building infrastructure that we can all use.
Exactly.
They're doing incredible things. And you may say, well, that's just selfish because, it's just to benefit them. Well, that's because you're thinking about things in a zero-sum way. It's like they're providing something that is useful to you, and they're getting benefit from it as well because, obviously, they're getting benefit from it in the form of money, right? But the only way that they're getting money is because it's useful to someone.
Right.
Someone's willing to give them money to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? This isn't like... It's not zero sum.
Yeah.
Like this is the way markets operate is that if you are willing to and able to do or produce something that is of value to someone else, right? And they give you money for it, then you both win. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
It's not hard to...
It's not rocket science.
It's totally not rocket science.
You could go off and do something on your own. If you don't want to work for someone, start your own business. It's going to be hard.
It's hard.
I mean, it takes
damn
time.
Hard.
Like, it's taken me a good while to be making, a decent wage for my jewelry. It's taken me years and years. But, you can do it. It helps if you have capital. It helps if you have people that can help support you. But, you could start a small business and be... at least relatively doing, 50 grand a year, 60 grand a year.
And this idea, well, if you don't, this is the other thing. I've run into these, literal commies, right? Anarcho-communists who think that, capitalism is slavery, right? And they're like, well, you could start a business, but then, even if you successfully start a business, some capitalist is going to come along and buy you out. It's like,
well,
seriously, these are the kinds of arguments that I run into.
First of all, you don't have to.
You don't have to sell.
Right? But maybe they offer you enough that.
Okay,
it's
so they give you a bunch of money. What's your point?
Jeez,
this is evidence that you can't do something that free that makes.
Right.
You can't be a free human.
Yeah.
This is somehow evidence that you can't be successful. Like some company's going to come, some bigger company's going to come along and buy you out. That's evidence that you can't be successful. That's what an entrepreneur calls successful.
Yeah. I think most entrepreneurs, unless it's their baby, unless it's something that they really just want to keep going with, plenty of entrepreneurs would be thrilled to have a bigger company be like, hey, we want to buy your company.
That's a great idea.
Hell yeah.
You're kind of, in our market or adjacent to it, and we would love to rebrand what you're doing as ours.
Yeah, exactly.
They just buy it and they put a new label on it and they say, that's cool because it's already working. They make some changes, they make it fit their brand a little better, and they run with it. Yes, lots of entrepreneurs are specifically,
hoping that that'll happen. Right?
Right, that's called success.
Right.
So this idea, there's...
It's just, I don't know.
It's really just resentment. It's really just like, oh, there's rich people who, that's bad.
I love the fact that we live in such a free society that, you can work for someone if you want to, or you can start your own business. I mean, you have freedom to do what you want to do. You can try out a few different things before you find the thing that you want to end up with, Yeah. You could go to trade school, you know?
You can do things like building fences.
Right. My dad made a very decent business building horse fencing for 30 plus years.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was hard work. He never had more than 1 or 2 employees. He kept it sort of small, but he did fine and he was able to raise us well, and he very proud of the work he did. You know?
It's not like you have to be...
He could have made it bigger, and that's the other thing. He could have made it into, like, a big company. Like, one of his competitors has probably, like, 20 employees. But he really wanted to just kind of keep it small and simple, be kind of part of every step of the process, make sure that he was doing very high-quality work.
He's a craftsman.
So, he's more of a craftsman than kind of a, I don't know what you want to call it.
And guess what? Even in modern America, you can be a craftsman.
Yeah.
Right? And that works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can do that. It's just a matter of, like, I mean, not everyone who's a craftsman can buy a yacht and be like balling with P. Diddy. Like, this is not the thing.
The kind of trips we went on were, like, road trips, very simple, but we had everything we needed and a little bit more.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's so much opportunity.
Yeah, and the redistributionist model is so
short-sighted.
Very short-sighted. It doesn't understand, like, dynamics. Okay, so, like, to kind of switch topics, I want to move to, this is something that actually just kind of, I didn't write down, that I didn't necessarily remember that I wanted to talk about, but criminal justice reform. It's just an idea I was kicking around this morning. So talking about the way that people don't understand the dynamics and things. A lot of people in the world of criminal justice reform are talking about, we need to train cops about their implicit biases and try to, make them not racist and stuff like this. It's like, all right, I think that's like just a super, super weak, watered down, like nothing of a reform. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff is nothing. I think an incredibly powerful thing to do would, and if you're listening and you've got ideas about this, if you see the problems in this kind of an idea, let me know what you think. My thought is that we should have the state pay the lawyer fees for anyone who gets off. So if the state wants to prosecute you, right?
Yeah.
And they can't convict you, in front of a jury of your peers, right?
Yeah.
Then the state should have to pay your lawyer for you.
Yeah, like the fees that you've incurred to go through court and then be...
And it's not like you're getting reimbursed either, because in that situation, a lawyer can say, I will do this for you, and I'll run a tab because I know we're going to win.
Interesting.
Right? And so then even poor people, right, can have access to badass lawyers because if they know they can win, right, and they're going to fight hard to win, they're going to get paid by the state. Because and that disincentivizes, not that the state cares that much about spending taxpayer money, but it kind of disincentivizes the state from bringing, shoddy cases against people, right, or just leaning on them and pressuring them. Right. Being like, come on, do you really want to, go through a trial? That's expensive. Right. You know what I mean? So many people are, swept up in the criminal justice system because they can't afford a really good lawyer, right, to fight their case for them. And so the cop can just make any nonsense stick. They're like, oh, yeah, we found some weed and, boom.
And who wants to go through a lengthy trial, you know what I mean?
Right.
And not be able to work,
And right now, all the incentive is on the state side, right? Yeah. So it's like you've got you've got district attorneys who are, they're supposed to be getting convictions. That's their job. Right. And then it's basically kind of every, kind of on the public side, on the people who are being arrested and, run through the meat grinder of the criminal justice system. Yeah. It's just, you'll get a public defender who gets, like 30 cases a week, and 10 minutes to look through each one of them, through a file and just kind of, it seems like a pretty good guy you're on around. This is our legal system right now.
It's really bad. It's really
So if you don't have any money, you're screwed. And that's the real injustice and the real imbalance, I think, in our criminal justice system, right? When you talk about, like, criminal justice reform, it's obviously, like, skewed along racial lines, but so is wealth.
Yeah.
wealth in our system is skewed along racial lines. And the fact that people get caught up in the criminal justice system actually stops them from becoming wealthy or from becoming wealthy enough to fight back. Right? So they get stuck there too. That's part of the cycle of generational poverty. You know, so I think a huge difference that we could make would be to just say, look, if the state is wrong and they wrongfully prosecute you, then they have to pay your lawyer's fees. And all of a sudden, there'd be defense attorneys coming out of the woodworks to defend people like, oh, I'm going to get a check from the government? Hell yeah, let's get this kid out of here. No way this kid's going behind bars.
Because then there's an incentive to really try their best, do their best to get this person.
Absolutely. Then all of a sudden, defense attorneys have really good defense attorneys, right? Have an incentive to work for poor people because they're going to get a check from the government when they get them out of jail. You know, when they get them, you know, acquitted.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, oh. And so now we're talking about shifting a dynamic, right? We're not talking about like, well, what we really need to do is make people more aware that racism is bad. It's like, that's not a good idea. Yeah. Like, everyone knows that racism is bad.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that racism is bad. And like, you know, preaching at people about it more doesn't change anybody's mind.
Right.
But if you take something like an economic kind of, you can use economic incentives like that. It's like, okay, if the state screws up and they wrongfully accuse someone and they drag them through a trial and they get acquitted, the state owes that person's lawyer their money. Right? Because it was the state's fault that person had to hire that lawyer in the first place.
Yeah.
They were wrong.
And the thing is, you can never get that time back, that person, but man, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be a great... I mean, I think... This is just like, I'm kicking this around in my head this morning. I think that'd be a great way to reform the criminal justice system, right? Put the power back in the hands of the people. It's like, all right, you want to bring a suit, you want to bring a criminal case against someone. That's fine, but you better have your, you know, all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. You better get that conviction, because if you don't,
although.
That's on the taxpayer dime. And then you get taxpayers going, holy crap, I can't believe we spent this much money, right, defending people in the last year. Who the hell is this person who's bringing all these shoddy cases against people?
Although, wouldn't they just be convicting people left and right then? Like, wouldn't judges be in on it? You know, the prosecutors?
Well,
like,
no, because you can go before a jury of your peers.
Right, but not all cases are brought before a jury, correct?
Because, well, yes, but that's because in criminal cases, a lot of times people plea bargain to get out of going to trial because the trial can take longer, and then, you know, it's also more expensive to have a trial lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So, right?
I'm just trying to think if there's a way that this could be bad, though. You know, I'm just trying to think.
I'm sure there are things that I haven't thought of, right? Yeah. But like, it's an interesting idea. That might be an interesting way to try and like figure out like people who are smarter than, I'm sure there are people who are smarter than me, understand the legal system better than me, who could take that idea and run with it and go, man, you know, we could definitely do something like that and find some way to keep it balanced. You know, like, okay, limit it to, you know, you can only hire one. You can't hire a team of lawyers. You get to hire one. And like maybe law firms can work around that by saying, okay, I'm the only one working for them, but like I'm, you know, $10,000 an hour, right? Yeah. So like, okay, we don't want you know, extortion from the state in that way either, because that's really coming from the taxpayers, you know. So maybe we got to limit the amount.
Yeah.
There'd be some
things. There'd have to be.
You know, base it on industry standards or something, you know, like this. But but at least we could.
Like if you wanted to use a lawyer that costs more than a certain amount, then you'd have to pay regardless.
Yeah, you'd have to pay the overage, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a basic, like a universal basic income idea, where you know everyone gets at least this much coverage in terms of their legal care.
Yeah.
If they, you know, if the state loses the case, if they get acquitted. Everyone gets up to this much, but if you want to hire a lawyer who's like $10,000 an hour, you have to pay the extra. Something like this. Yeah. I'm sure there's ways that it could be worked out, right? But just the idea of putting, you know, holding the state responsible for the legal fees of people who are, you know, who are dragged through the legal system and then acquitted. Yeah. That's a huge. It's a huge shift in the dynamic. It's like all of a sudden, you know, kids from from the poorest neighborhoods get the same quality lawyer as a kid from the suburbs or anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you know, maybe still there's like, okay, yeah, if you're like insanely rich and you want to hire, you know, a law firm, you know, that charges ridiculous rates and stuff like that, you still have an advantage, but at least you're not just like, you're not stuck with a public defender.
Right.
Who you know, just gets like 30 cases dropped in his lap every week.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any time for you at all.
Yeah.
You get somebody who's dedicated to be on your side because they feel like they can win this case, and they're doing their best to do so because they're going to get paid by
the state.
Then
they don't have to take money.
They're going to get their government check.
Yeah.
They're going to, you know, that check's going to clear, so everyone's going to, like, all the lawyers are going to try and go for it. They're going to, yeah, hell yeah. There will be lawyers competing for your case.
That'd be nice.
Right? It's not just like, oh yeah, here's 30 cases that get dropped in one public defender's lap. There would literally be lawyers competing for your case. You know, if you were arrested for something.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me that would be an incredible shift in the dynamic. And it would do wonders for our criminal justice system. Because right now we're running at like 98% conviction rates.
Yeah.
It's like everyone that the police talk to or, you know, pull in is guilty. Everyone.
Morph. Come
here.
Quiet. Come here, boo.
Get over here.
Come here.
Come up. Come here. Up. Come here. Come on. Stop barking. There's nobody here.
Well,
there's probably people in the parking lot or something.
Lay down.
Lay down. Come here. Yeah. Hi. So that was an idea I had kicking around in my head.
That's cool.
Another thing I want to talk about briefly was kind of the idea of our doggy. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the idea that it's been bothering me recently is the consequences of a two-party system in light of a cultural developmental model and this kind of the oscillation between individualism and collectivism, right? And so if you're listening to this and you know what I'm talking about, you can go and I put a link to our talk about spiral dynamics and cultural worldview development in the description, so you can check that out if you want to. But I'm just going to go ahead and talk in spiral dynamic ease. So like if you've got the red meme is, you know, right, might makes right, you know, and so you've got, you know, the one most powerful warlord, and it's kind of an individualistic ethic. It's like who is the most powerful in their individual being, right? And then the blue meme is more collective. It's like what is the higher order? You know, the glory of Rome, the Catholic Church, and you know, my country, right or wrong, patriotism, all this kind of stuff. America, all that, right? It's collective. It's a very ordered collectivism, but it's you know, and you know, and it tends to be religious or mythological in some way. The glory of Rome was a, you know, kind of mythological trope. Same idea. Yeah. It's an organizing principle, but it's a collectivist organizing principle. And then you get the orange meme. It's individual rights, right? It's a globalist kind of thing. It's more expansive, but it's focused. But the reason it's globalist is because it's focusing on the fact that all human beings, regardless of race, religion, creed, etc., are human and they have human rights. And so you as an individual have the right to, you know, live your life the way you want to. And it's all about individualism. Yeah. Then you get into the green meme, and people think that it's hyper individualistic because, like, oh, I can be any gender I want to. It's like, no, you know, or because of, like, you know, moral relativism and these kinds of ideas that kind of creep in the green meme. People think it's hyper individualistic, but those it's more about systems. It's about systems of people. Yeah. Right. So they talk. This is why, you know, Judith Butler talks about gender as a performance. Right. It's like you're not actually, you as an individual are like almost not actually there. It's just all these different things that inform your performance. You know, and so it's all about systems of oppression, systems of economics, systems of everything
lumping
is
people in their group identity.
Right. It's abstractions.
Yeah.
Right, as opposed, it gets away from the individual transaction. So, an an orange meme economic system, capitalism says, individuals exchanging, engage in, the free exchange of property and resources. It's fine, it's no problem, right? And so they see that as individual choice.
Yeah.
In the green meme, you get into systems, and it's more like, no. Those people are engaged in a system that oppresses people because of what economics call what economists call externalities.
Okay.
Damage to the environment, damage to or exploiting people in third world countries for their labor, this kind of stuff. To bring, people are exploited in sweatshops, and then they get this cheap, close to slave labor over there, and then they bring it back, right? So, obviously, I don't believe in slave labor. I think that's wrong, but I think it's the idea that we're necessarily exploited, that capitalism necessarily exploits people, who are getting paid,
right,
to do something, and they have the right to not do that thing.
Right. I mean, they don't have the best working environment there, and I'm not all for it, but a lot of people in, like, third world countries, like, a lot of people living in the rural areas will move to the city and work at these jobs so that they can send money back to their families in the rural areas. And again, it may not be the best environment, they may not be making a lot, but they're certainly making more than nothing,
Well, and that's the thing, is, like, people don't realize that we went through that period here too.
Yeah.
Right? We went through those horrible working conditions and everything.
Where people were forced to work a certain number of hours per day, and they, like 16.
We didn't have any protections for workers and all this stuff.
Right.
We went through that, and part of what we went through was developing a cultural consensus about what makes sense for us.
Right. So
why do, is that okay? Right? Is it okay for people to work 80 hours a week and not get paid any extra for it?
Right.
Like, is that okay? Well, no, we came to a collective consensus that that's not okay.
Right.
We don't have a right to make that collective cultural consensus for a culture that hasn't gone through their own industrial revolution yet.
Right.
Like, we just don't have that right to kind of impose our cultural consensus on them, because they may be at a point where there's more than enough people who are totally willing to work 80 hours a week because they just want a better life, and they don't care about all your high-minded ideas of fairness and all this other stuff.
Right.
They just want to plow through it and make a better life for their kids. That's none of our business.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty Eurocentric, actually, to,
We like to go into places
and
try to make
stick
things better.
We're going to take it in here. Yeah, moralize, that they should, that these people who are just, starting to have electricity and running water, right, should have the same moral standards for workplaces and all the regulation and everything that we do. It's kind of ridiculous.
But anyways, get back on track.
What did I get onto?
Where
was I?
Well,
I was talking about criminal justice reform. I also wanted
to talk
individual versus collectivism.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyway, so I think that the green meme is actually very collectivist. And I think that one of the problems that we're seeing, and one of the reasons that we're seeing the problem so in terms of polarization in the United States, obviously polarization in a two-party system is exacerbated because of the fact that it's a two-party system.
Right.
So,
so it's,
everything that's in place to kind of maintain two parties contributes to our polarization, because you can't vote your conscience, right? Like if we had like instant runoff voting or something like this, where you could say, well, my real choice, the person I'd really like to be president, is this person, right? My second choice would be this person, my third choice would be this person. And you like let that, kind of let that filter out, so that you don't have to say, well, if I don't vote for, like, I don't know, the 2016 election, right? It's like maybe you wanted to vote. I wanted to vote for Rand Paul. I wanted to vote for Rand Paul on the Republican side, right? So, at some point you end up with this thing like, well, okay, if I decide to write in Rand Paul, then I'm taking a vote away from the guy who might defeat Hillary Clinton, right? Then it's kind of like, okay, then I'm throwing my vote away, right? I threw my vote away anyway because I was just not going to vote for Trump.
Yeah. And we were in a state that you knew was going to go to Hillary anyways.
Yeah, so I voted for Gary Johnson because I was hoping the Libertarian Party would do well enough to get them on the ballot. I was honestly trying to fight the two-party thing. Yeah. Even back then, it's not like you were a big
fan of him per se. It was just more like let's get
like,
the Libertarians.
It was basically it was functional. I was trying to say if we can get 15% of the population can go, oh my God, these candidates are both so horrible that we can, that I'm going to vote third party. If we get 15% of the population to vote for, if he can get 15% of the vote, and he got something like 11 or 12, it's so close.
Then but they would get funding, right?
They would be automatically allowed on the stage. They would be automatically included on the ballot. They wouldn't have to. Right now, most of the Libertarian Party's fundraising goes to just trying to get on the ballot in states that only allow the two-party system, right? Yeah. So, but if they had made 15% of the vote, they would be automatically allowed on the ballot almost everywhere. Right, so like
they'd be at the national debates.
They'd be in the national debates. They'd be allowed in the televised small little. They'd be allowed on the televised debates. All this kind of stuff. So they'd be included in the process, kind of by default, automatically. And then all their fundraising could go to actual campaigning instead of just legal battles to try and get on the ballot. Right.
Maybe this next.
So I don't know if we can. I don't know because
it's so polarized.
It was such a. It was a really like. It was like the perfect window, and if it didn't make it in that window, I don't know if it's going to in the next one, because most people are just going to go, okay, well, Trump's the guy in office, and so whatever. But, so anyway, I was kind of trying to fight against the two-party system with that vote. But the two-party system is definitely contributes to the polarization, but in light of a cultural worldview development kind of perspective, we've got basically most of the country, most of the politically engaged country, I should say, is blue, orange, and green. Yes. Okay, that's the vast majority of people who are politically engaged in this country. The red meme is pretty much not politically engaged. No. Don't care. Right. But the blue meme is the traditional Christians and mostly traditional Christians, but social conservatives, ethnocentric, law and order, my country right or wrong, America. Okay, blue meme. The orange meme is individualist, classical liberals, libertarians, capitalism, individual rights, free expression, this kind of stuff. I think that's a big chunk of the country, actually. And then on the left, you've got the green meme, which is systems of oppression, power dynamics, and the kind of the interplay of
ecofeminism.
Ecofeminism, yeah. These okay. So ecofeminism is an intersectional feminism. It's a lot of feminism. Yeah. A lot of feminism on that side, right? Systems of oppression. Yeah, so a little bit of Marxism, a lot of Marxism, and socialism, these kinds of things. Collectivist, again, right? So what we've got right now is, I think, one of the reasons that the polarization is so bad, one of the fundamental reasons the polarization is so bad, is we've got a two-party system. We've got two parties struggling for power, right? And it used to be that those two parties were struggling for power in a system or in a culture where most of the people were either blue meme or orange meme. So it was collectivist Christians and kind of fundamentalists, America nationalists, right? Versus kind of world-centric individual humanists, right? But now we've got a wider cultural discussion to have, where we've got the Christian conservative nationalist types. On one side, a big swath of individualists and classical liberals and libertarians and capitalist type people, individual human rights humanists, secular humanists in the center. Yeah. And then you've got on the left, you've got this, this eco-feminist socialist kind of thing going on. It's it's an identity. It's kind of a postmodern identity politics. and systems on the other side. And so you got the two parties that they can't exist in the center because they agree on too much. They can't differentiate themselves. Even though that's where most of the populace, I really think most of the populace is actually kind of in that center.
Yeah.
But they can't have that discussion because you can't differentiate yourself from your opponent if you're like, well, yeah, I agree on, I think that individual rights are, basically a good idea.
Because are you saying that, like, of the people that are at Orange, that like half of them have more conservative ideals and half of them are more, or like, I don't know.
I think there's a lot of policy, and there's a lot of nuanced policy discussion that can be had in the center, right? Center right, center left. It could be like, well, if you want to talk about, like, I don't know, legalizing marijuana, right? Or that was just pretty much a no-brainer to me, but I'm going to say, like,
abortion.
Abortion. Okay, so abortion is a really highly contested one, right? You could say that you've got extremists on one side of the issue that are just saying that, look, at the moment of conception, that's it. You've made all your choices. Bear your responsibility. You're done, right? You're pregnant. Carry it. Have a baby. That's it. You've made your choices. There are people who are, kind of in that vein. Hardliners who, at the moment of conception, that's a baby. You're defiling the will of God if you take the morning after pill or something like this, right? They're, contraceptions are bad. You're not allowed to use, condoms are bad, like birth control pills are bad. Like there are people who are way over there, right? There are people who are way over there that, like, contraception is, defiling contraception is defiling the will of God.
Wow.
Right? And then what you should do is you should control things using like the rhythm method, or if you don't want to have a child, don't have sex when you're at your most fertile. And if you get pregnant anyway, then that's God's will. Like, they really, like, that's, there are people who really believe that. And that's, so there's hardliners, in that regard. And on the other side, yesterday, was it yesterday? Day before, something like this? Recently, this past week, in New York, the celebration, they kind of, on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, they basically made abortion legal up to birth. Like full term babies can be aborted at 9 months and 2 days.
It's a little crazy to me to think about.
So that's pretty insane. It's really extreme, and like it's supposed to be. Oh yeah, kind of. I don't want to be just spouting. All right, let's bring a little nuance in. The law says beyond 24 weeks, it's legal in cases of where if
the health is compromised,
right? The safety or health of the mother. Right. So it's allowed for the safety or health of the mother. So it's pretty kind of like that. Now,
but
it doesn't. The law also doesn't. Yeah, it's subjective because the law doesn't define the health of the mother. It leaves that up to the doctor. So it's kind of like, well.
So any doctor that basically
it doesn't even say that psychological health or financial health or anything is like not included.
Any of that could be.
It's anything. You can just say, her. You can just make up terms and be like her happiness health.
Right.
Her happiness health.
Psychological, emotional well-being.
Yeah, her emotional
well-being.
Health, yeah. Right. So whatever. You can just kind of say her whatever kind of health is impacted by having a child. It's like, well, obviously a woman's health is impacted by having a child.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Like, just the fact that she's putting on weight still in the 8th month is like, that's a literal effect on your health. So, okay,
So basically we're going to probably see a lot of abortions.
Having like taking a child, through to full term women lose bone density to their infants.
Yeah.
While the infant is in utero, right?
Like, yeah, they're taking all sorts of minerals.
Yeah, so
that's why you've got to take like prenatal vitamins.
Right, you got to take all sorts of supplements, right? So like,
you know,
absolutely carrying a baby to full term is
a
health impact. So
yeah.
it basically right there, you're just kind of like, it's legal.
Yeah.
Right? If a woman comes in 8 months in, her, you know, her prospective partners, you know, left her or whatever, and you know, whatever the situation might be.
Or she just decides
it's a tough situation.
She doesn't want to do it. She's like, I don't know. You know?
Yeah, this is too scary. I can't deal with this, right? And okay. So then it's like, sure, and I'm sure it'll be, you know, before long it'll be, you know, one of those situations. I don't know if there's a waiting period or anything. You know what I mean? Like, you know, imagine being like, 8 months pregnant and freaking out. I can't do this. I can't do this. Well, hold on, take a few deep breaths and wait 2 days, you know, something like this. But I'm sure that if, you know, if conservatives were like, say, okay, we should put a waiting period in there, right? Like for whether or not you should, you know, like you go in to have an abortion, like maybe you're just freaking out. Wait 3 days.
Or,
I'm sure that wouldn't be allowed either, you know what I mean? Not in New York.
But like they could even counsel, like there could be counselors, like, you know, talking to the woman and at least kind of, because if you don't have a support system, you know, and you're freaking out,
nobody's saying
it's like easy. I think most pregnant women probably freak out at some point during their pregnancy, or at least have feelings of stress and anxiety. And if you don't have anyone there with you to kind of like help you out and be like, look, I know it's scary, but you're going to do a good job. You're going to do okay. We'll be there for you. If they don't have a support system, then, you know, it'd be a lot easier for you to just be like, screw this. I can't do this. I can't imagine ever aborting a baby, but that's just me. But I also have a support system. I have people, you know, in my life that would be there for me if I mean, you for sure, and other people as well, that, you know, if I was feeling stress and anxiety about not being able to do it or feeling like I wouldn't be able to, I know I'd have people talk me down from my stress and anxiety, you know?
Yep.
And not everyone has that, and
not everyone has that. Nobody's saying it's easy, you know, but I just don't know,
it's
like the whole.
Sad.
So anyway, there's extremes on both sides, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we've got extremes on both sides. There's probably a lot of room in the center, right, for reasonable people to have a discussion about things, an objective discussion about the. You know, well, the point of viability, you know, like when is a baby like able to continue living outside the womb?
Right.
Okay, well maybe that's a reasonable kind of, maybe we should have a discussion about that. That keeps moving because of technology. So maybe we should say, okay, well, absent technology, what's the point at which, right? Maybe that should be the point. And like, you know, there's all sorts of kind of objective kind of discussions that we could have. You know, very reasonable discussions that we could have in the center about where, you know, where we should draw a line, if we're going to draw a line, why we're going to draw that line. And, you know, we've been doing that for a while now, actually. But as we've progressed as a culture, we've gotten more people in the green meme who are, you know, not only capable of seeing the individual transactions of, you know, capitalist free market society and free individuals, but they see the systems that those interactions are embedded in, and so we get more and more people in the green meme who are interested in those systems and see any attempt to have a discussion about whether or not a woman, you know, should be allowed to make the choice, you know, later on in the as a system of patriarchal oppression. So they see it in terms of identity.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so suddenly it becomes this identity thing on the left, and there's the other thing is you see it in terms of your Christian identity on the right. You know, you identify with, like, it's a moral panic on both sides.
Right. And then you've got orange memers who are like individualistic and scientific materialist, and I would think most of them are probably for a woman having the choice, having the right to choose.
I think a lot of people in the center are like, basically, okay, the kind of standard that we kind of agreed on in the past couple decades in the center was legal, safe, and rare. We want abortions to be legal, we want them to be safe, and we want them to be rare. So that's kind of what we want to work towards. We kind of agreed to that as a standard of something, as a good goal, right? It should be legal because we don't believe in like preventing people from doing things. We believe in individual rights, you know, and we also don't believe necessarily that a clump of cells is the same thing as a human baby.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a fan of abortion, but at the same time, part of me is like, well, would I rather that woman have an abortion or raise the child and be a horrible mother? She doesn't want to be a mother, but she's forced to be. Yep. Is she going to be able to change and become a better... I mean, she might change. Well, she might actually... But you know what I mean? If a woman is forced to have a baby that she doesn't want to have, I guess I'd almost prefer her not to be forced to, because I just think that there's plenty of really bad moms out there as it is. You know, there's like plenty of people who are just very selfish. You know, they're not attentive. They're, you know, they're drug addicts. You know, we're all human. We all have our issues. I'm not saying I'd be perfect either, but I mean, you know, there's certain things you know to not do, like don't drink and do drugs around your kids, or you know what I mean, or while you're pregnant, don't smoke while you're pregnant, don't do this, don't do that, you know. But I guess I have mixed feelings. I really don't like the idea of abortion, but I know several people have had them, and you know, if you can't afford to have a kid, you don't have the you know, clarity of mind to do so.
One of the arguments, of course, is that if they're not legal, just like anything else, it creates a black market.
It creates a black market, and they're going to happen anyways. They're going to be unsafe. I mean, women used to use coat hangers.
Exactly.
You know?
And then they die of internal bleeding.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
it's not an easy right or wrong kind. I mean, it's wrong. I think it's wrong, but it's not an easy thing.
It's not an easy discussion to have in terms of, okay, so you can say, it's kind of like one of these questions of whether or not the culture, whether or not the law, whether or not we should be legislating morality, right? And in a lot of, like, okay, murder is illegal. Is that a legislation of morality? Yes, right? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But
it's also like, you murder someone, you're taking away their right to life. So like, it's more than just, it's immoral.
And so obviously this intersects with abortion, right? It's a really complex conversation, but that's the point.
Yeah.
There's a really complex conversation to be had, and we're missing the middle because we've got a two-party system. And in a two-party system that's trying to represent a three-level culture. Right. We have the poles like just being pulled in the opposite direction because they can't differentiate, right? If they're talking in the space of the culture, it used to be that the space of the cultural center was actually the divide between the orange meme and the blue meme.
Right.
It used to be that the cultural center was the divide between, you know, kind of my country right or wrong, nationalist, Christian, fundamentalist types, and the kind of the old school classical liberals, rational enlightenment individualists, human rights, right? But that's not the cultural divide anymore. We've got a third piece of the culture now, this green, you know, the emerging green meme that's becoming politically powerful, politically important. There's enough of them that they're politically important. And so we've got a three-tiered culture, with the majority of us in the orange meme in the middle, right? But a two-party system that's trying to represent that whole three-party, that three-layered system, right? There's three different kind of fundamental ideologies going on, right? And there's only two parties to represent it. And we've got a system that's set up to kind of maintain that two-party dynamic. That's why we're so deeply polarized, because the center can't be represented in a two-party system that's set up to divide, that's set up to work in a partisan culture. But we don't have a bi-modal culture now. We have a tri-modal culture.
Yeah. So how is that going to work?
Well, the way it's working is that
And is there a healthy...
The radical left is getting representation, and the radical right is getting representation.
Right.
And the vast majority of us in the center are completely unrepresented.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. Like, I feel like I already went through the green meme, because I was definitely in that kind of, like... I was never, like, super far left, but I was definitely on the left, and I was definitely into... I don't know that I was ever really into feminism so much, but, I mean, I went through the green meme. You know I did. I was a total hippie. And, but, so, I don't know, like, first of all, is there a healthy expression of green? And is the pathological expression of green so strong that it's going to keep people who are in the blue meme and the orange meme from wanting to grow and keep...
No, there's definitely healthy expressions of the green meme. There's definitely important pieces of nuance and understanding that are coming from the left. I think a lot of times, I mean, just people like Ezra Klein, very, very insightful in a lot of ways, and you know, they have a very nuanced perspective.
Or like, well, I don't know, Brett Weinstein.
Brett Weinstein's
he's
another one.
probably orange to green. I think maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think of him as certainly a, you know, kind of aware, systems aware.
Yeah.
You know, certainly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to be an evolutionary biologist without being aware of how, you know, systems work.
Right, exactly.
You know?
I'm trying to think of anyone else who's, like, shown to be, like, a healthy level of green or beyond, you know?
Well, suffice to say they exist, okay? So we've got...
Yeah. It's just that mostly the
the
pathological...
guys at Rebel Wisdom, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so if you look at... I didn't link to them, but I'll put them in the description, too. The guys at Rebel Wisdom, very, very interesting stuff. They're, I think they're probably integral, or, you know, at least green, but maybe integral. I'm going to say they're probably integral.
What about, Quillette?
Quillette is probably another... Quillette tends, I think, towards orange. Okay. I think Quillette tends towards orange. I think a lot of the stuff out there tends towards orange, towards the cultural center. And there's center left and there's center right.
Now.
We really do, but we don't have any systems in place for it. And I think that's what I was kind of wanting to kind of flesh out more than anything else, was this idea that we've got systems set up for a partisan clash, right? The founding of the American Republic was built on a fundamental ideological divide between the orange meme, the new orange meme liberal ideas of the rational enlightenment and, you know, individual freedom and individual human rights and all these kinds of things, and the older, you know, kind of monarchy, blue meme, you know, God-fearing Christian order. Okay, and so that was the. I mean, and we were mostly blue meme people, right? The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution was written mostly by radical revolutionaries who were way ahead of their time, and they were just orange meme people, right? They were just the orange memers, right? And so they set up a system that would allow for individual human rights in the context of, and the reason that we always ended up having two parties most of the time is that it was always in the context of that cultural divide between the blue meme and the orange meme. Right? And so as the orange meme evolved for most of our history, for a couple hundred years now, we've been evolving to a point where I think in the 60s we kind of hit a cultural tipping point in the United States, at least, where there were more, there was suddenly, like, the new generation coming in were more orange than blue, right? So we kind of culturally, as a center of gravity, we shifted over the line and kind of started to become mostly orange. It's just I think that was the tipping point.
Okay, yeah.
The divide between the blue and the orange was in the 60s, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, we're no longer like, by and large, the majority, the upcoming majority, is no longer constrained by the unreasonable strictures of religion, right, and tradition. Like we're moving into a new individual world where everyone's, individually equal, and we've got, okay, civil rights are coming into, look, segregation is wrong, right? We've got this whole, the women's movement, women don't have to follow the rules of tradition. We can have, interracial couples and it's okay, and, all these things. It's like all of a sudden the orange meme was like, just tipped to the balance and just became more powerful. All of a sudden, right? And so I think that happened in the 60s. And then since then, we've continued to progress, and we've gotten more and more green, and now we're at a point where the majority of the culture is in the middle at orange, right? And then, but it's being pulled apart by a two-party system that represents that in order to differentiate from each other, has to try and say, well, I'm not like that guy, so they have to either go further left or further right, and they're representing the green meme and the blue meme, and they're trying to reach out to nationalists and postmodernists, and that's where the culture is. That's why the wheels are coming off. That's why the political system is being torn apart, because we've got a two-party system that's trying to represent a trimodal culture. And we need a third. We definitely need a third party in the center, but there's so much systemic baggage involved in maintaining a two-party system.
Right.
I mean, there's just there's like power hegemonies that are, not going to go down without a fight. But nobody's talking about the fact that the two-party system is a serious problem in a trimodal culture.
Well, I wish Integral Life, I wish Ken Wilber and their guys.
Yeah, it would be nice to hear some more talk about this from people in the Integral community.
I haven't really been listening to them a whole bunch, so I don't know, maybe they have talked about it, but...
Yeah. So that was one thing. And then I wanted to... The other thing was, the other night we were talking about women in the military and gender, we were listening to Karen Strong.
Yeah.
And you said something about, you were kind of like, well, I don't think it's going away.
Right.
And I was like, well, that's not necessarily the case. And I've been kind of kicking that around in my head recently over the past couple of days, and it's like, I think it's important to delineate that just because we currently think of something as progressive in our culture doesn't mean that it's actually progressive. And we've got, so in terms of like women in the military, and I don't want to try and flesh out the entire argument that feminism is destabilizing society. It's not. I don't want to go down that route. But let's just say that we assume right now in culture that women should be in the military, and if they're not in the military, that's regressive, and that we're going backwards. Okay. That's a pre-post fallacy. Okay. I think. Right? Because there's a difference between saying that. All right, there's a couple. If society destabilizes, and we go into a situation where there's this kind of authoritarian push to prevent women from being in the military because women are silly little creatures that belong in the house barefoot and pregnant. Okay. That's possible because sometimes societies that are trying to progress do so many wrong things in their attempt at progression that they destabilize and collapse to an earlier mode of being. Right? And so we could end up destabilizing and collapsing back into kind of a strong blue versus orange dynamic because the green meme is going in the wrong direction. Right? If the green meme is leading us in the wrong direction, it can cause enough destabilization that we can collapse back into culturally speaking, a more blue versus orange dynamic, where and that's just because we don't have the society collapses economically and socially to the point where people just don't have the resources to learn and to think and to pontificate and explore ideas enough to get to the green meme. The green meme is something that exists as an outgrowth of incredible prosperity, right? It's available to us because of the level of, not at an individual level, but on a political level, the fact that so many people are able to achieve that level of contemplation and nuance is because we have an incredibly prosperous society. And if those ideas, right, destabilize the society enough, we won't have that kind of prosperity. We won't have that kind of ability for that many people to hang out and do that and think about things. And so we will drop back into kind of a blue versus orange culture, right? So we can, that's real regression. If in the green meme, we can recognize, women are not really not supposed to, right? They're not built for combat.
Right.
And if we can be accepting of that, and, you know, without having to attach that to some kind of devaluation of women, right? And we can say, that's not the best use of women.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the best way to kind of
utilize our
strengths as women in society, right? And like we should just be okay with having, you know, men be the Navy SEALs and women can be in the military and other roles, but like not necessarily like trying to push for those.
Right.
Like, if we push for women to be Navy SEALs, right? Or, you know, Rangers or whatever, right? Marine Recon. We push women into, like, we try to push to include women into the most elite units of our special forces in the military. We're going to degrade our military.
Yeah.
We're just going to, because women don't belong in those units. They just don't.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I don't see in the foreseeable future, short of genetic modifications and stuff like this, female bodybuilders being bigger and heavier and, you know, bigger muscled than male bodybuilders.
No.
It's just not going to happen, right?
No.
Like, there are physical, actual differences that matter in the real world where the rubber meets the road. Women don't belong in the Navy SEALs.
Right.
By and large, I just don't think it's... If a woman can pass all the things, maybe she belongs there.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I just don't. I just don't think it's going to happen without lowering standards, right?
Right, without lowering standards.
And so if you're going to lower standards, then what you're doing is you're actually degrading your forces, right? So if we can say, look, we're going to accept kind of the value of meritocracy, and we're going to let women go wherever they want to, as long as we you know, don't degrade meritocracy in the process of you know, to do that, then people have the freedom to do whatever they're best at, right? And we still end up with the best of all things, and we're not reducing the number of women who are allowed to be physicians, for example, right? Because women are taking over the world in the world of physicians, right? Women
in the civilian world, you mean?
Yeah, as far as but in all these different domains, if we say, look, we're not going to say, like, women can't try out for these things or can't do these things, but we're not going to lower our standards or have quotas to ensure that women get into
I think that's important.
Right? So if we maintain that if we can maintain that meritocracy and say it's okay if there's differences in outcomes, right? And it's okay if, for example, in 10 years there's almost no more male doctors because women just kick ass in that field. That's okay.
Yeah.
But it's also okay if there's no women in the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we can just kind of, like, accept those differences and allow people to maximize their potential anyway, without it, you know, kind of artificially enforcing any kind of quotas or restrictions, right?
Yeah.
Like, quotas or restrictions. You know, you can't artificially keep people out, and you can't artificially include people.
Right.
Let people do it.
I hope that's the case.
If we can manage that, then maybe we don't have women in the military and we're still being progressive. Right? We're still able to progress.
We have we don't in mostly combat.
Right. So maybe we drift, though, and to a point where maybe we continue to drift to a point where the disparity between men and women in the military grows even more, and there's even fewer women who are interested in being in the military, right? Like in Scandinavia, you got this kind of, like, this divergence of preferences, because you've got all this freedom to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So, you know, the biological underlying kind of preferences just kind of manifest themselves more and more extremely, right? When you've got an impoverished culture, more like 1.2 billion people in India. There's lots of women in tech.
Yeah.
There's more women in tech in India than in Scandinavia.
Right.
It's like, well, are they more free? No, they're under greater economic pressure.
Right.
Right.
That's
to,
where the money is,
right.
And so they're going for those jobs,
right.
And they're good at it,
So if we're willing to say, look, parity in outcome is not necessarily the point, right? But
freedom, though, to choose what
absolutely.
you want to go for. You still have to prove
right.
your merit. You still have to prove your talent in a certain field.
So if we can maintain those positive aspects or positive ideals of the orange mean, right? If we can maintain that, then maybe we can move forward in a way that's progressive, where maybe we don't have. It's not like we're trying to not have women in the military,
right.
but maybe we don't have women in the military, and that's okay.
Right.
Then I think then society can progress, and we end up in a situation where, okay, maybe there's not so many women in the military, or there's not women in the most elite forces of the military, but we're not forcing it to be that way. So
right.
It's not the same thing as regression.
Right.
Right? It's not the same thing as having a society that's destabilized to the point where everyone clamps down and goes, no, back to the old ways, right? And I think that's what we're in danger of in terms of the things that are being promulgated by kind of the modern leftist,
right.
feminist intersectional narrative.
Yeah, it worries me as well. I hope that's the case, I hope we can just allow things to occur as they're gonna occur, like, what's with this 50-50? What's with this need to have extreme parity? Is it parity is the word?
Yeah.
Like, women can choose, I mean, if they have value in tech and they want to go into tech, they can go into tech. There are plenty of really skilled coders that are women, plenty. I mean, you know what I mean? They're out there.
Yeah.
But not everyone wants to be a coder. Not every woman wants to be a coder.
No, it takes a really like kind of strange personality to want to sit at a computer and write strange, like, just. I do this. Yeah. You sit there and you type something, and then you press save, and you go over to another screen, and you click run, and you try to see it, and you go, oh, that didn't work either. And then you go back and you go, boom, and you see if it works, and it doesn't work, and you do it again, and you see if it works, and it doesn't work, and you see it again. You're like, oh, okay. Oh, that worked, but then there's a different problem.
Right.
It's like this consistent.
It's a puzzle, right?
It is. It's a puzzle, and it's tedious. Right. It's this kind of like try. It's this constant process of trial and error, right? Within really strange parameters.
Yeah.
And you're trying to your victory for the day as someone who does code is that a piece of information like a word shows up on a screen. You're like, haha, I did it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And it's so hard to show others all the work you did because it's like this is all that happened because of it.
And it's like you meanwhile you're integrated 3 different databases and you've got all this stuff going on, and what you've got to show for it is that a series of words shows up on the screen. And you're like, you've done an incredible amount of work, and what all anybody can see is that there's a word on the screen, or maybe a table shows up on the screen or something, and they're like, oh, well that's great. But for you as a coder, you're like, haha, all these things that I've done. It's it's really tedious.
Yeah.
It's
certainly not my cup of tea.
Right. But okay, so you've got to be a special type of person to want to do that, first of all, and not that a special type of person is so unique and special and amazing and great.
I know what you mean.
There's only so many people who actually want to do that kind of stuff, who find that rewarding. It's not and it just so happens, right, that it seems the vast majority of people who want to do that, right, not capable. Not capability-wise, but want to do that and find fulfillment in that tend to be men.
Right. And that's changing. I mean, it has changed over the last decade or so, I would think that there's more and more women that are going into tech.
It's about 80-20.
Huh. And what was it 10 years ago? 90-10?
Maybe.
You know? Like,
but
more women want to do it, but...
There's certain... Here's the other thing about that, about this divide that is not often talked about. Mm-hmm. Men and women don't very much in their kind of like... There's practically nothing in terms of IQ that's a variance between them, right? Now, when you talk about spatial kind of, when you talk about math, like math skills and science skills, it's not that women don't have them. Mm-hmm. Men and women both have them equally, but it turns out that women who have high IQ in math and science also have high verbal skills. And so they get into English and literature and stuff like that, right? And so, whereas men who have really high math skills, also, they just tend to not have that diversity of intelligences.
Right.
It's less likely that they're also very good in literature and stuff. Yeah. So and in language. And so women have more choices when they get to college, and they say, well, do I want to sit in front of a screen and iterate over arrays with for loops for the rest of my life? Do I want to do that? Right? Or do I want to engage in art and history and literature? And it's like, well, I mean, if I have that capacity and I can, why wouldn't I?
Right. Yeah. That sounds more fun to me than.
So, so that's another thing.
We're at like an hour and a half.
We're going too long?
Yeah.
All right. So I fleshed out a couple of ideas that I've been kicking around recently, and hopefully,
hopefully it made sense.
Made sense. I appreciate you, putting up with me and letting me talk it through, because they're really kind of vague ideas. One, they're there. I can see them, but it's hard to articulate. You know what I mean? I can visualize the way the systems work, and I can see what's going on, but it's hard to express in some ways. And so it's helpful to be able to kind of talk them through. So, the difference between progress where there aren't women in the Navy SEALs and regression where there aren't women allowed in the Navy SEALs is one, kind of dichotomy that I wanted to explore and express. And the other one, individualism versus collectivism in terms of this kind of we've got individualistic center, we've got collectivist authoritarians on both sides of.
What do you think like a solution would be for this issue, like to have a third party?
We really need to fight for freer elections so that we can have a broader diversity of opinions and ideas in the political arena, and we have to understand that that's going to mean, kind of like the parliamentary system in, you've got UKIP in the UK, right? And this is a pretty hard nationalist kind of party, right? They're very much nationalists, right? And so if we're going to have to kind of say. And this is one of the reasons that so many people, like, say, in the intellectual dark web are so, kind of constantly reference the intolerant left, right? This kind of faux tolerance and the faux diversity. It's like the diversity of thought, the diversity of perspective, right? In order to be truly tolerant, we have to recognize that there are nationalists in our country, and that they're not horrible people just because they're nationalists. Right. And that they deserve a voice in how the country that they live in treats them and how the country that they live in is run, right? And that that they deserve representation, right? So
and that not all people who are right of you are white supremacists
Right.
or are racist or
Right.
bigots, you know, like
Right.
they're not all horrible people. Right. And even if you're a nationalist,
it's kind of like,
you're not a horrible person.
It's kind of a it's kind of a put up or shut up for, you know, people who claim to believe in democracy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like if you're on the left, right, and you're still raging about the fact that Donald Trump is president,
mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? You're actually not. You don't care about democracy at all. You know what I mean? You don't care. You're totally willing to smash the, you know, this other group of people. You don't care about, you know. You just, all you care about is majority rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same thing as democracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Democracy should be ruled by the people, and that's what they always talk about. Oh yeah, the people,
mm-hmm.
right? We want the, you know, the voice of the people to be heard. We need people to be represented,
mm-hmm.
right? Well,
they don't want everyone to be heard, though.
If 48% of the, you know, country,
mm-hmm.
in terms of straight numbers, voted for Trump,
right?
Then you don't care about the voice of the people,
right?
Like,
Just
as
your
a whole,
people.
You care about the voice of your people,
yeah.
And so that's why a democratic republic like we have in the United States
mm-hmm.
is important, because it doesn't just smash the 49% on the other team, and
mm-hmm.
you know, it doesn't allow for, you know, 150 million people to be disregarded,
mm-hmm.
right?
And just, like, you know, brushed off as horrible
right.
individuals. It's like, I'm sorry, but, you know, half the population are not horrible individuals.
Right.
Just because you would disagree with them does not make them malevolent, horrible human beings.
And then, I mean, these are, you know, okay, so if you also got how many people actually voted, and of those people who voted,
I know,
all this stuff. But you know what I'm saying? Like, in a representative democracy, or you know, republic, it's supposed to protect against, you know, the abuse of the minority.
Yeah.
You know, so that we don't have just straight up mob rule, and that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So, you know, this idea that, you know, we need to just get these MAGA hat wearing nationalists and, you know, round them all up and, you know, put them on a boat to some other place where they don't have, or, you know, it's like, it's so condescending and horrible.
Yeah.
You know, and for a supposedly tolerant left to be talking this way is, I mean, it's a complete abdication of the traditional role of the left of sticking up for the working class. It's
mm-hmm.
like the people in Pennsylvania and Michigan,
mm-hmm.
you know, who voted for Trump,
mm-hmm.
who voted for Obama in the previous election, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are people they're working class, and mm-hmm. they've seen the economy deteriorate, and
mm-hmm.
here's a guy who's saying, look, we need to take care of Americans first.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that doesn't make them bad people, right? It doesn't make them racist. It doesn't make them any of the things that they're being smeared with, and it's the left needs to really kind of reconvene and talk about what tolerance actually means, and kind of maybe they need to drop some of this intersectionality nonsense,
mm-hmm.
because it's an artificial. It doesn't even understand intersectionality. Doesn't even understand anti-Semitism properly, right? Because the reason anti-Semitism spreads is particularly because people are prone to conspiracy theories about some group of elite people, you know, pulling all the levers and, you know, some masterminding some plot to destroy the rest of us. Right?
Yeah.
And so the fact that Jewish people are predominantly represented in, you know, the heads of banks and in media and stuff like this,
mm-hmm.
right? The fact that they actually do well
mm-hmm.
feeds into anti-Semitism,
mm-hmm.
right? And intersectionality just kind of goes, well, they don't count because they're kind of basically white and they're powerful and successful, so they don't count.
That, so,
right?
If anything, they're oppressors.
Right,
know?
Exactly. So they don't fit into the intersectional narrative, even though that's exactly why anti-Semitism works.
Mm.
It's exactly why anti-Semitism, you know, is functional in coalescing people in opposition to Jews. Right? The fact that it doesn't fit into the intersectional narrative, you know, I mean, it's such it really is kind of, it's too simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of hierarchy
all the
of oppression, right? These hierarchies of oppression are way too simplistic. Oppressor versus oppression, versus the oppressor versus the oppressed narratives, fundamentally Marxist, fundamentally too simplistic, and just not functional. The left needs to really kind of reconvene and address that fact and figure out how to move forward without those kinds of oversimplified narratives.
Yeah.
So
what's the moral of today's story? We need a third party.
We definitely need a third party. We definitely need a third party, but I think that a third party isn't exactly flexible enough. What we're seeing right now is the kind of artificial limitation of numbers of parties is it's its own kind of collusion. I mean, this is so obvious in the American system. It's anyone who's looked at politics for more than a month or two can kind of see that basically we've got an Overton window that is, especially right now, becoming dysfunctional, and it's like two separate Overton windows. It's like you're allowed to have leftist points, you're allowed to have right-wing points, and that's it. It used to be that there was kind of like you're allowed to have these, kind of this spectrum, but it's only these two parties. But it was functional in a culture that was basically bimodal like that. But we're not in a bimodal culture anymore, and so we need a flexibility, because that's the other thing is we're always going to have a red meme, we're always going to have a blue meme, we're always going to have an orange meme. No matter how advanced we get, people stop trying to work on personal development at some point, and they just settle into their lives, and they're happy with their habits, and they exist at wherever they can. Yeah. Some people push it, and they want to learn and grow and be, and our culture helps people do that to a certain extent, right? Wherever our center of gravity is. Right now, I think it's orange, but there's always going to be people who are not all the way caught up to the, furthest advances. So we're always going to have, some red and some blue and some orange and some green. So the number of parties that we need is going to continue to increase, right? So I think we need a more flexible system, maybe something parliamentarian, something like this.
I wonder if it'll ever come about. It's
at least a discussion that needs to be had. The way that the two-party system is totally hamstringing our cultural growth, and it's right now it's in danger of causing a civil war. Like it's dangerous, and it's structural. You know what I mean? Like there's so much
hate and distrust amongst people.
Yeah, and it's being driven by the fact that there's only two potential avenues of power. It's the Democratic Party or the the Republican Party, and those are
and they both have their problems.
They both have their problems, and not least of which is the fact that in order to kind of maintain their own constituencies, they're necessarily dividing the country between the blue and the green, and they're tearing apart the kind of reasonable center of the culture, which is so there are people who are center left and people who are center right, and those people, the center left, are more kind of inclined towards the arguments of the green meme, right? They're interested in exploring and going further. They're fundamentally liberal. They want to see more perspectives. They're interested in exploring new solutions, this kind of stuff. The center right, fundamentally kind of conservative in their nature. They want to conserve what's already working, and part of what's already working is capitalism, right? And free markets and the free individual that we've kind of built up in the modern West. And so they're inclined towards kind of right-wing thought, right? And so when you get that, and then you've got a political class on either side that has to somehow galvanize the blue meme and the green meme, they're to differentiate from each other. The narratives that we're getting, it's like I'm inclined towards the left or I'm inclined towards the right, and so it's tearing apart the reasonable orange meme center along lines that aren't particularly like the people in the center of the culture could agree. Mm-hmm. You know, if we got together and talked in a coffee shop, we could mm-hmm. have conversations about things like abortion or gun rights mm-hmm. or all these other things. We could kind of get together and have conversations and have reasonable dialogue as people, but as in our political system, we can't have it.
Yeah.
Because the political answers are either over here in the blue meme or over here in the green meme, and they're constantly drifting that way to galvanize support. And because you can't galvanize support if you're not different enough from your opponent.
Right.
So if you're in the middle and you're talking about centrist ideas, it's all individual rights and a proper balance of state power and individual rights, and it's all, they're all the same.
Yeah. So people in the orange meme don't really have a good choice of
political... And honestly, that was primarily the complaint of people for the last decade, is that who cares? Both parties are the same. Now they're obviously different.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we were in a situation where both parties were basically the same because they were representing the majority of the population, which was the orange meme, the rational modern center, not the postmodern left or the pre-modern right. Mm. But now, right, we've got we've made more progress as a culture. There's more people who agree with the postmodern left, and there's enough people to support this new schism, right? And that's why we're seeing the fracture in the Democratic Party. And that's why we've got the fresh young face of the Democratic Party, and there's all these identity politics socialists who are green memers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I've been ranting crazy today. I've spent most of the time talking. I'm sorry I didn't.
No, I like listening to you.
Didn't give you.
No.
But if that was valuable to anyone, let us know in the comments. If you thought it was a pile of horse manure, tell us that too. Appreciate any feedback always. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter at Just Us Chatting, and I'm thinking about putting together a website that we might use, justchatting.com. So we may put up clips and stuff there. I still haven't gotten to breaking these up into clips and putting out shorter segments, so I'm sorry about that.
It takes a while.
It does. It takes time. We've got so many things to do.
Yeah.
We'd love to do that. I'm setting up a Patreon, because it's easier than setting up our own website, so I'm going to do that for a little while. We'll see. Also, I'm not really entirely sure that I think that Patreon's super evil. I think they were probably pressured by MasterCard. Yeah. So anyway, there's always so much to talk about. Mm-hmm. But maybe we'll talk about more of it tomorrow instead. And we look forward to any feedback that anybody has for us on Facebook, Twitter, or in the comment section here on YouTube. So
thanks for watching.
Take care and have a great afternoon.